Alright, we are back with another 5-sheet today. Remember, the 5-sheet is a free tool that anybody can use to analyze a news article. So today, we are going to analyze this foxnews.com article about the Lincoln Project and this backlash that they are facing. So I'm going to start out with the known bias of this author or outlet. I don't know much about this Joseph Wolfson, but Fox News I have as establishment right, meaning that they are not a radical fringe organization and they are not left wing. They are your standard corporatist Mitch McConnell wing of the Republican Party, so to speak. Alright, let's scroll down here to find the thesis. It's in the first paragraph. The Lincoln Project is facing intense backlash and potentially major legal trouble after it was accused of publishing screenshots of private Twitter direct messages belonging to one of its co-founders, Jennifer Horn. Now, is that a fact or opinion? I put it as fact. It's kind of long, there's a lot going on there. But I think the only part that's arguably editorialization is this word intense. You could say that's just a subjective matter how intense that was, but that's pretty mild. Like, there's the legal trouble that they're facing, but they have this qualifier on there. Potentially. And then, did they actually publish these screenshots? It only says they were accused of publishing those screenshots. So there's a lot of qualifiers on there where it's not the actual writers of this article coming out and making the claims. They're just reporting what other people are saying. So that's a pretty factual headline. Again, intense is the only debatable term on there. So I'm writing it as a fact. How did I paraphrase it? The Lincoln Project was accused of publishing screenshots of private Twitter DMs of Jennifer Horn, one of Lincoln Project's co-founders, and is now facing intense backlash and might be facing legal trouble. Not too much change there, again, because it's a fairly factual thesis, but just changed up the order a little bit there to make it a little bit more clear. Alright, so what do they have in terms of evidence supporting that thesis? They do have some quotes from the actual Twitter thread. That's this paragraph right here, which they say has now been deleted. They describe this as a lengthy thread, and they have the beginning of it quoted right here. And then they also have a number of people reacting to it. They have George. So that first quote is to establish that they published these screenshots, and now to establish that they're facing intense backlash and might be facing legal trouble, we get into the other evidence. George Conway indicates that it might be a crime. That is this tweet here. This looks on its face to be a violation of federal law and should be taken down immediately. So that's evidence going to this point. Might be facing legal trouble. And then about facing intense backlash, they have the subject herself. They have her saying, hey, I did not give consent. So that's just the person herself. Maybe that's not much backlash. But they include quotes from these 3 other people. Tablet Magazine associate, Noah Bloom, Maggie Haberman, and then Ryan James Gerdusky. So they have quotes from those 3 other people with negative reactions. Alright, next we're going to move on to the outline of the article. What was the content of this piece? Started out with that thesis and then gave a little background on Jennifer Horn and her relationship with the Lincoln Project. How she left it last week and how how the Lincoln Project now seems to be accusing her of of preparing to do a story against them with this other news organization, or with this news organization, 19th News. And then next up is number 3 here. They quote the actual Twitter thread from the Lincoln Project. And then for a while they have all these reactions to it. They have George Conway warning about the crime. They have Jennifer Horn reacting to it. They have those 3 other social media people we mentioned a minute ago. And now we're moving on to number 5 here. 19th News, and they put out a statement saying that they're not going to be bullied or intimidated out of pursuing critical journalism. They're going to keep doing their thing. I've never heard of 19th News before, so this kind of feels like this is the first time they've got their name in the spotlight, and they're just trying to run with that. They're just putting out like a press release type thing, like, oh, we're doing that legitimate investigative journalism. And then, yeah, so that I don't include stuff like Lincoln Project did not include to inquiries, just, these kind of housekeeping type of paragraphs. And the final paragraph here is about the Weaver and the sexual allegations. That was kind of the first thing to rock the Lincoln Project a few weeks ago, when one of the co-founders was accused of a series of sexual allegations. And that is where the article ends up. So next we're going to move on to the name deception tactics. Any one of the ones on this list here seem to be the most common tactics they use in these printed articles. If you'd like a little context for what these are, you can check the glossary included in the description. So the one I saw in this article, debatably, was undue emotion. Overall, this was a pretty straightforward article, as we're going to talk about in a second. But some of these social media reactions they included added a little bit more than just the emotionality. Some of these quotes they had were, "This is legitimately outrageous." That's not a very substantive quote. Or, "The Lincoln Project is on a full meltdown." Same thing there, where it's adding more emotion to the story than substance. It's, now, the counter argument is that this article is just reflecting how people reacted to it on social media. And if the consensus on social media was one of emotional outrage, then that's what needs to be reflected in the article. But it's hard to know that for sure. What we do see in the article is those 2 quotes which have very little substance. They have a low substance to emotionality ratio. And so when you drive up your reader's emotionality, that tends to push them away from rationality. And that's usually a hallmark of bad news practices. So that one is a little bit of a question mark. It's not the most obvious deceptive tactic, because it might have been the actual landscape on social media, but it does raise some eyebrows. Alright, and finally we're moving into just the takeaways. What was the big picture? What did we think was going on here? I thought it was a pretty straightforward article, not too much going on in terms of manipulation or deception. And I think the reason why is that the facts of this story played into the narrative that Fox's readership is interested in. So there really wasn't a need to stretch it with deceptive tactics. This story itself was just tailor-made for what the editors at Fox wanted to say. So they pretty much just had to copy and paste it. Copy and paste the facts onto their website. And it was a good Fox News story. The facts didn't run counter to their narrative in any way, so they didn't need to hide anything. You could argue that the facts were a little bit short, and that's why they added these, substantively hollow quotes, which I noted here. So maybe that was a little bit of a stretch to fill the story out. Something that was really not too much of a story. But overall, not too much going on there. And I think that's why. It's just the facts were exactly what Fox's readership wanted to read. Alright, so that's what I got for this one. If you think I missed something, you can leave that in the comments, or as always, fill out your own 5-sheet. Alright, I'll see you next time.